Hello, welcome to the Tiggzi training course. Today what we're going to do is to create a Windows 8 app using the Twitter search API, some custom JavaScript, and the data mapping feature. We're also going to use Windows 8 specific capabilities incorporated into our app. We'll show you how you can use Tiggzi to support those. Here are the steps that we'll be following. We'll talk about what makes a Windows 8 app a native Windows 8 app. We'll set up the UI, the service, and the data mapping. And then we'll show you how to incorporate Windows 8 capabilities into your app using Tiggzi. And finally, we'll test and debug using Visual Studio. Let's talk a little about Windows 8 apps in general first. When a user installs your Windows 8 app, it shows up as a tile on the start screen. Touching or clicking the tile starts the app. Your app can deliver content through its tile even when it's not running. This is called live tiles, so your app can provide useful at-a-glance data to the user while minimizing battery usage. Unlike traditional desktop apps, a Windows 8 app has a single chromeless window that fills the entire screen by default, so there are no distractions. A Windows 8 app can also support different layouts and views to create a fluid and harmonious experience across a variety of display sizes. An important part of Windows 8 is its charms, a specific and consistent set of buttons in every app. For searching, sharing, a start button, connecting, and settings. Users can search for content located in your app or in another app, and they can search your app's content from another app. Another charm you can use is the share charm, which allows you to share content via other apps like email. For more information about Windows 8 apps, check out any of these online resources. Okay, let's start creating the user interface for our app. What we're going to do is we're going to use a feature called More Create Options to make this app. We can put in a name, and this allows us to select Windows 8 app as the type of app. So let's create it. Alright, let's go over and select our home page to start working on. What we're going to do is we're going to change the basic screen layout by adding an extra row. So let's select the grid component. And then we're going to zip over and type in an extra row of 60 pixels. Now we're going to go to the component list and select a label item and drop that in. And we're going to change the text that's displayed in it to Twitter search, which will be the title for the screen. And we're going to increase the size of the font. And we also will change the font to a different font. Now let's select the parent item and change its alignment to start. Next, we'll drag over a grid component in order to display our search field and search button. Let's jump over to Properties and remove one of the rows from our grid. And let's also set the first column to be 300 pixels. Select the parent cell from the grid now, from the breadcrumb on the top, and set the column align to start. Let's go over and grab an input component and drag it onto the layout. And then we're going to go over and change its name to be search input. Then we're going to select the parent element for the input and set its alignment to start. Drag and drop the button now, and we'll change a couple of their properties. One, we're going to change the name to be search button, and we're also going to change the default text that appears in the button to be search. Alright, so now let's go and save and preview. And it looks pretty good so far. Let's go back to the builder now and create the layout of the tweet. we'll drag over a list view component, and then we'll take a grid component and drop it into the list. We'll add an extra row to the grid, and then we'll set the first column to be 70 pixels and let the second column occupy the rest of the space. We'll set the width of the grid to be 500 pixels, and the right margin we'll set at 100 pixels. Let's go over now and grab an image component and drop it into row 1, column 1 of the grid. We're going to change its name to be user pick, and we'll scale it down to 64 by 64 pixels. Let's now select the parent for the image component and set its alignment to be start. And now we're just going to drag over 3 label components to fill in the second column to represent the rest of the tweet. We'll name each of these labels name, text, and date respectively. And then we'll select the parents of each of these label texts and set their column alignment to be start. Let's also get rid of the default text that's in each of these label components. Little housekeeping. And then we're going to grab the list view template and set its height to be 300 pixels. So that's it for the setting up of the UI. In our next step, what we're going to do is we're going to create a REST service as part of our app. So let's go up to Create New. Let's add a service asset. We'll call it Search Service, because that's what it does. And we go here and can start setting properties for it. We'll put in the URL. There are a variety of different data types that we can use here. We're going to use JSON-P, which is JSON with padding. It's a communications technique used in JavaScript. It provides a method to request data from a server in a different domain, which is prohibited by typical web browsers because of this thing called the same origin policy. But anyway, that's what we're going to choose. It's available with this REST service, and so much for the lecture. The next step in developing our service asset is to define the request structure. So we know that Q is query, so we type that in, and let's test it. There we go. Click, and you can see it returns a meaningful response, which is what we're looking for. You've got 2 buttons here. You can one for automatically creating a service response from the test that we just got. Another is to use this as an echo response for testing purposes. It's very useful, but you need to remember to disable it. The main thing that we'll do here is we'll automatically create a service response from the so we've already kind of populated that structure just based on the response we got from our test. So let's go over there, and you can see how the response structure was created automatically. You can also see the nested data that's for the tweet response itself. In the next step, what we'll be doing is mapping the service to the UI. In order to do this, we need to go back to the home screen, and we're going to click on the Data tab. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a data source and it'll be connected to the search service that we created already. So we add that in, and we're going to call this search service. Not a very imaginative name. And now we edit the mapping. There are separate tabs for request and response. What we're going to do is we're going to edit the request side first. And that's pretty simple. You just find the text and drag it over, and it automatically maps it. Now let's move over to the response. For populating the the user pick, user text, and so forth that we set up before in the UI. So we just find the appropriate responses and click and drag. It's pretty straightforward. To get the tweets to repeat, we just drag the results array over and click and drag it onto the list view that we created in the UI. Now you can see all the data mappings. The final piece that we have to add, though, is an event so that to trigger the actual data mapping. And for that, what we need to do is we need to go back to the design itself and click on Events and select the button. Then let's assign the action of invoke service to clicking the button, and we'll use the search service as the service, the only one that we have as the target for this. Now let's save and preview the app. We'll type in HTML5, and there you go. Let's try something else. Let's try Windows 8 and search again. It all looks very nice, except there's one thing we could improve, is the date is displayed in a raw format. Let's see what we can do to fix that. So let's go back to the start screen, click on the Data tab, and then we're going to edit the mapping for the date. And we'll click on the Add JavaScript button. Now right here we could type in the actual function, or we could actually store it in a JavaScript asset that holds different helper functions. So let's create that instead. Alright, so we'll call it helpers. Okay, we'll paste it in here for the purposes of this demo. It's just pretty straightforward, parsing the raw date into something that's a little more meaningful, a month and a day. So let's go back and let's actually invoke the helper function that we wrote. And we save. And back to saving and previewing. Now when we type in a search, we have a much more friendly date to use. In this next segment, we're going to look at what makes an app a Windows 8 native app. What can you add in Tiggzi to make it to add the special Windows 8-ness to it? So the first thing we're going to look at is the search charm. This is a search app, so it seems kind of natural. What the search charm does is it allows you to search, is a global search for anywhere in the system, and what we're going to do is make this our search app something that works with that search charm. Before we get on with it, here's a link that you can use to look up more information about the search charm. Let's create a new asset for the app, and it'll be an extension. So it's a search extension, so we create it. Our search results page is our home page, and our only data source is search service, so we'll click there. Now the next thing is element for query text. Here we specify the source of the request element. In fact, this is the input data. So we have to select search input for this, and then we move on to search controls. Microsoft doesn't recommend using a separate search in applications, and instead recommends that you use the search contract to search. But if it's necessary to have search in an application, it has to be consistent with the search contract, which basically boils down to never having two search fields on the screen if you're going to use search charm. So what we're going to do here is in this last selection, we're just going to select and set the elements for the search, which should be hidden when you start search contract, which is, in this case, search input. Next, we're going to move on to discussing the share capability, which allows you to select a lot of elements and then share on Twitter, on email, or any other app that supports sharing. When people swipe from the side of the screen and tap the share charm, the share pane will appear with a list of apps that people can share their content with. This list includes any apps that are share targets for a particular data format. If your app has content to share, your app is a share source. If your app can receive content from other apps, then it's a shared target. And of course, apps can be both at once. So when people choose to share content, source apps provide the requested content in a shareable format and display the metadata in the content preview. The chosen target app then launches, reads the shared content, and displays whatever UI is appropriate. And if you want to find out more information before we get started about the share contract or the share charm, you can use this link right here. Let's go to the home page and open the Events tab. Here we're going to select the home page as a component, and we're going to select an event called Data Requested, which is a native event for Windows 8, and from the action list we're going to select Share Contract. Here we're just going to use cut and paste to put in some pre-made JavaScript that just needs a few little tweaks in order to work with this. We need to change the put in the list view name instead of Twitter list in the getElementById function. And one last thing is we have to paste in the name of the element that represents the list of tweets. So now here let's take a more detailed view now. You can see first of all that here's where we get all the elements of the list view, and then we get the destination and the text of the selected message, and here we fill in the name and description, remembering that these fields are required, and finally we add the data link and text. So now we have search capability, we've gone over share capability, and what we're going to do next is look at live tiles. But first let's talk a little about them. A tile is an app's representation on the start screen. It allows you to present rich and engaging content to your user on the start page when your app is not running. Tapping or clicking the tile launches the app. The tiles come in two sizes, square and wide, but there are some variations within those categories. Tiles can be live, where they get updated through notifications, or you can leave them static. Tiles begin as a default tile defined in the app's manifest. A static tile will always display the default content, which is generally a full tile logo image of the app. A live tile can update the default tile to show new content, but it can also return to the default if the update expires or is removed. If you want to learn more about tiles, you can check out this link that I'm going to display. To create our live tile, what we're going to do is go back to the Data tab and go down to the Event panel and select our service. It's the source of data for our tiles, and then we're going to select the success event, which means that we have a search result and we have data to display. From the action list, we'll select Update Live Tile. And then in the tile template list, you'll see a lot of styles. And you can find out more information about these if you follow this link. For now, we're just going to select the tile wide small image and text 04, and that should work well. And here's a more detailed view of the JavaScript code that we will use. Let's uncomment it. And we can just poke around a little at it. Now, don't forget to set the period. That determines the update interval for your live tile, and we'll just add it. Okay, we've got search capability, share capability, and live tile update. Now we're going to add a snap view to our application. If you go up to the home page, at the top you can see different views of the application. If you select any view, you can set the specific layout only for that view, and it doesn't affect the other views. So we are going to set a snap layout for our application. So let's select it and make some changes. We'll select the basic grid and set the width of the first column to 5 pixels. Then we'll select the Twitter search label and set its font size to 32 pixels. And we'll select the search input and change its width to 150 pixels. Finally, then we'll select the parent grid of the search input and set its width of the first column to 200 pixels. Then we'll select the grid that represents a single tweet and set its width value to stretch. Also, we'll set the stretch width to the list view template. So we have search capability now, we've got share capability, live tile update, and snap view for our application. Now we're going to move on to testing. To test our app, we have to export it as a Visual Studio project. So let's save it and then click on Export as VS Project. Now I move the folder of our project to VS Projects folder and run Visual Studio. And we open the Visual Studio and open our project, and let's debug it. So we see our application is successfully run. Let's type something in search input. You can see that it really works. Okay, now let's test the search charm. Let's go to the side and click on something. And there we go. Let's select something and use share now. So we'll send it to people. Let's just type in a little message that goes along with this item we're sharing, and we'll send it to our message list. So that works too. Now let's try, what should we do next? Let's try to look at the snap view. Take our application, drag it over, and you can see how all of our styles are being applied now. We have a smaller search input and a smaller title. Also, a single tweet takes up the whole width. Now let's test the filled layout. Okay, we'll type in a term and make sure it works. Okay. Alright, let's go back and test the snapped view too, just to make sure, and that works too. So you can see both layouts. Either way, the search capability is still there. Now the last thing we're going to do is to look at the live tile for Tiggzi, and there it is. It'll show a random tweet, and the tweets will be updated every 5 seconds. And remember, that's a value that we set earlier when we were setting up the live tile update. That's it for our discussion of Tiggzi in Windows 8. Thank you for watching.